Hi, we have a number of projects going on here in the city of Sioux City that pertain to stormwater management. One of the projects that we have is down here in 4th Street Promenade. I'm going to hand the mic over to Roger. He's going to explain more about this project.
Okay, thanks, Tom. As he mentioned, we're down here on historic 4th Street in Sioux City, and back in 2016, our city leaders put in a grant for this project that you see behind me, a little bits and pieces of it. But we received some grant money through IDLES, and along with city matching funds through a CIP effort, we were able to move forward with the project and get the results that you see behind me. The project is feeding off of both street and rooftops for stormwater, and it fills in the center biocells and basically helps to recharge the center ground. And it was completed back in 2017, so it took a little bit of a few challenges to get through to put it together, but as you can see, it's full going and looks great. Some of the other responsibilities that I have in my office is Environmental Advisory Board. I'm the lead staff member for that board. And through our efforts, we have a number of projects that we are undertaking. One of the big ones is our annual litter dash, and we had the largest volunteer participation this year of over 1,100 participants throughout the city, and we collected over 3.5 tons of trash. And so that was a very productive and positive experience for all. To piggyback off of the litter dash, we have adopted the 22 on 22 campaign, and that's been well received through the community. And we've been doing outreach efforts through weekend events as well as press releases, and really trying to get the word out. And as a matter of fact, I did catch one of our citizens today picking up litter along the street, and was able to thank him, and hopefully we'll be able to use that as a positive push throughout the community. Some of the other projects is our rain barrel reimbursement program. We just got that underway, and we will be reviewing our first application at our board meeting later this afternoon, so we're excited about that. That's been well received as well, and will help towards the water quality for residential citizens, and we'll be doing a lot of education around that as to giving them some opportunities and different options that they can do on site for their yards and so forth. Other additional programs that we're working towards and trying to make these annual, we do have a spring and a fall re-event, which is electronic take-back. We partner with other businesses in town that will take batteries, take styrofoam, as well as light bulbs, and then we have a large partner vendor that comes down from Sioux Falls that picks up the larger electronic items such as TVs, computers, and those larger bulk items. And then we also are working with our solid waste vendor to put together a tire take-back event in which we'll just have some roll-offs put down in a single location and allow our citizens to come and drop off any old tires. And that is a push to help clean up our alleyways and ditches, to give them an opportunity to help again with the litter effort, to help clean up and keep beautifying the city.
Here we are standing along the Missouri River here in Sioux City, Iowa. We're located at the mouth, or I should say the discharge of Perry Creek, where it's coming right into the Missouri River here. There's a couple other tributaries of the Missouri River that flow through Sioux City. Got Bacon Creek, Floyd River, as I mentioned, Prairie Creek and the Big Sioux. So all those dump into the Missouri River here in Sioux City. Interesting fact about the Big Sioux, it goes all the way up through multiple lakes in South Dakota. So all those lakes eventually get discharged down about another couple miles west of this location. I'd like to also talk about a project completed here in Sioux City at Prairie Park. Prairie Park used to be an extension of the wastewater treatment plant. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they utilized lagoons to get rid of their biosolids, and those lagoons would fill up, and they take those lagoons out and put in. Well, another new technology went into the wastewater plant to help improve water quality, and that eliminated the use of those lagoons. So the city thought, hey, let's turn this into some more green space. They fenced off the area there at Prairie Park, converted the lagoons to make them deeper. They connected multiple other ponds, so as the stormwater is running through the ponds, obviously some treatment is occurring in each one of those ponds, and ultimately ends up in Prairie Creek Pond. And that pond ultimately discharges here in Missouri. Another interesting fact there at Prairie Creek is they tore out all the old grass and invasive trees and bushes and installed and planted native pear into that area. So it's a beneficial, really great thing for our community. It also helps with our stormwater management treatment of that water.
What would you say is the water or the watershed or the place in Iowa connected to water that is most, that you care for the most, that you're most affectionate about?
Oh, okay. Well, I love every creek. Like, streams are really fun for me. The bubbling, rocky streams is something I always search out. But if you're talking kind of a legacy water, I would say it's probably where I spent a lot of time growing up. My grandparents had a cabin on Twin Lakes in north central Iowa. So, seeing the changes and just being there from when you're little to when you're older and watching the cycles has been a fun experience.
No.
And your favorite water bodies and places?
I can't pick one. I'm not going to pick between my kids like that.
All right.
I think for me it was another lake. It seems like a lot of kids who grow up in Iowa or the upper Midwest get to have those experiences on a lake. Mm-hmm. And it's so formative to feel like this region and childhood, if you're lucky, up here in the upper Midwest. So my lake was Okoboji. Mm-hmm. My parents met up there when they were young and they fell in love, and then they passed sort of their love for that space to me and my sister as well, and it's something that we keep going with our kids as well. But it's not just a very special and unique body of water like that. I'm with you. Give me the water that moves. I love, and that was really my childhood as well, because I grew up in Muscatine on the Mississippi. Grew up listening to the train cars pounding into each other all night when I was a kid, watching the barges going up and down the river, looking at all the industry that was supported by that river, even going down to some farm ground that my family has that's right on the Muscatine Slough, on the border between Muscatine and Louisa County, right before it discharges out there into the Mississippi. And being around that and finding out how special that little ecosystem, that little habitat is there in southeast Iowa, and how closely it's tied to the natural system there of the river and how it comes up and goes down and backwaters and all the other things that are supported by that. I just kind of fell in love with that when I was a kid. It's something I take a lot of pride in now when I think about where I've been, where I'm from, what I want to make sure my kids understand about watersheds and about really the Mississippi. It's such an iconic, it is a waterway that the world knows.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about kind of growing up and just, seeing those areas and knowing that they're special and knowing that that's, I guess, to me when I looked around and saw, erosion and what it was doing to water, from an early age, I knew I wanted to, work in the field that would make an impact on that and protect it, because it was so important to me from, growing up camping and being around the rivers and streams and just seeing what how it all fits together in the watershed and
Sure.
in the.
So tell me that path then. So you've got this passion for these waters. You decide, I want to try and find a way to work on this stuff. So how did you go from your childhood then into becoming a professional?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I knew I wanted to be outside a lot in my career. So, in high school I took a test on your interests, and it said I should be a vet. And I thought about it for just a few minutes and went, nope, can't do that. And then just, water was it. So I went to Iowa State and I was looking at ag engineering, and I got hired by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which was a soil conservation service, as an intern.
Okay.
And so that really led into my whole career with that opportunity that they gave me to come and work in the summers and learn and go through college. And then I went to grad school in water resources. And then when I finished, I went to be a watershed coordinator up at Pine Lake. So here's another lake that needs protection. Working with the ag producers, and my love of native plants really grew, and my interest in those. And from there, I had the opportunity to hop into urban conservation, and that to me was very exciting from the standpoint that I felt like there was a lot of changes in the field, and that I could affect some of that change in maybe a more productive way than I was in agriculture. I was helping people solve problems in agriculture, but in the urban world, it's the progression of it through my career, to where at first I was going out of state and coming back and saying, you should see what they're doing in other places. We should do something like this. This is how to handle some of the issues we're seeing in our urban areas in water quality. So take that and fast forward to now, where we're actually building those and doing the things that we were once just looking at others doing. Has been, a really rewarding thing to notice.
Sure. It feels like things are accelerating right now.
It does. It does.
And for the better.
Right. I think some of the flooding we've had has really kind of brought into perspective what we need to do as communities to protect water quality, to, manage not only the big storms but the small storms, and then the storms that cause the destruction to our streams and rivers, the channel protection storms. And so, the process over the last several years, where as a metro we talked through some of those things and thought about, well, how can we add in the policies that will allow us to develop that way. One of the really interesting things, I think, between the ag world and the urban world is, in the agricultural world, you get a do-over every year. Next year you can make changes to your conservation, you can do something different. But in our urban world, if we develop and we don't add in those components while we're developing, we may never get to make that change, or it's super expensive, or maybe 30 years later, if we're doing a renovation, we can make a change. So I feel like the urban world has some special urgency.
Yeah, there's some real stickiness to the built environment in an urban setting. What you've developed a neighborhood, once you sort of decided how the water's going to move through a space, changing that gets expensive, and also the risks of it not working go up potentially as well. We've got to make good decisions early if we're going to have resilience in our neighborhoods long term. Yeah,
and I think, looking at our stream corridors and not encroaching on them so much, so that we're having to buy the homes out if we can and create those places, because that's really, that infrastructure, it is infrastructure, it's natural, it's needed, it's green infrastructure, and it's what's really doing a lot of the work for us. I don't think we can engineer our way out of every solution.
No, that's probably something that I have more respect for now than at any point in my career. Just how water shapes neighborhoods, cities, how those natural processes that are always happening in a watershed are so central to so much of what we do. In the community that I work for now in Clive, we're kind of special because we're built right along one creek, and we're at the bottom of a watershed, not a huge watershed, but Walnut Creek watershed feels really big to us. in part because we get almost 90% of the flows and make up a very small percentage of
Yes.
the total acreage in the watershed. And over time, not very much time, it's going to be completely urbanized. Right now we're chewing up about 400, 500 acres in the watershed every year with new development, more impervious driveways, rooftops, streets, which brings great living for so many families, but there's a trade-off. If we're not doing that development the right way, then we're creating a whole host of other problems when it comes to water. Fast water that's erosion, that comes with power down into the creek, that's eroding, whether it's a big event or a small event. It's amazing to me how much power there is. But as easy as it is for me to get focused on some of those issues that come with the management, especially when we have that big life and health and safety event with a flood or something, the much more common experience that we have in our community that is shaping me is seeing people down next to the water, seeing how their affection for that space is just growing. As I see it growing in my kids, or I see it growing in people who are visiting, or growing in people who have been here for years and years. People love this water. They love this water. They love getting down next to it on the trails. They love listening to it. They love watching it change through the seasons. They love seeing all of the wildlife that comes down to this amazing little creek as well. It's a huge part of our identity, and it's something that I hope continues to grow, and that we, as it does grow, that we keep building more and more awareness as well in our community about why it's important that we are good stewards of this space. That whole stewardship ethic is something that I think it's a wonderful hook, because it's something that people say, yeah, I want to be known as a good steward of this place.
Yeah.
And as they learn about really simple things that they can do, that moment from saying, golly, I'd like to do this, to actually taking action, it can be real short. You can get people moving very quickly when it comes to water stewardship.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and you've got kind of a unique thing that you're doing within your greenway with your goats for restoration as well.
They're the most popular city employees by far. They're probably the most popular government employees in the entire state, I think.
Well, I had to bring them up because I also raise goats, and I really got interested in them as a restoration tool as well. And so, you know, it's really kind of a unique perspective that you can focus some people's attention on why is this important, and what are you doing, and what are invasive species, and goats eat them. And
that's right. And how does an invasive species like the one that we're really struggling with in our greenbelt, the honeysuckle, people wouldn't necessarily look at that and understand, oh, it shades out everything below it, and then we have bare soils which are more erosion prone. But we're starting to help people make those connections.
Yeah.
It actually kind of takes me back to something I got to do. I was very fortunate to do when I was in college. So I went to Grinnell College.
Okay.
And one summer while I was there, I was sticking around in town like an Iowa kid and having fun in Grinnell. And I got an internship working out at the Conard Environmental Research Area that the college runs in Powashik County. It's kind of right there on the border between Powashik and Jasper County. And it was there where I started doing prairie restoration. There was an old farm pond that was part of this acreage, and on where we had the restored prairie, and that's where I started really putting together the connection between the role that plants play and healthy soils play in good, clean water and good, healthy water habitat as well.
Right.
Had I not had a chance to do that work and go out there and do prairie restoration and feel how hard it is to try and remove, invasives out of that space, not to mention then just how hardy and resilient those native prairie species are. That was such a special time for me to get to understand what the function really is of an entire watershed, not just the water itself, but everything else that's in the watershed, to keep how interdependent it all is to keeping things healthy.
I would say natives are one of my favorite topics as well, because I've had some background in them with all the jobs, so it kind of moves forward with the body of knowledge that you have, and it's a place that a lot of people struggle because they just haven't had that access. But it's interesting, even in the urban area, how key it is, ag areas and urban areas, how key some of our native vegetation is for watershed protection, for the ability to, it created the great soils we have, but the ability to use them in a lot of the practices, or use them on the landscape as a buffer for, getting that water back in the ground and creating the ecosystem, or, even the songbirds and the butterflies and the caterpillars. You know, a few small bioretention cells we put in on a street in Johnston. I can drive down the street still today and the songbirds fly out of them and they're nowhere else in the landscape, and the butterflies are everywhere, and it's like this little tiny patch of habitat. And so helping people understand that's, I think, really important.
Right. That's probably more than anything else that's on my mind right now when it comes to all of these water resources projects we are doing. The biggest question on my mind is, what are going to be the sort of the next hooks that keep this acceleration going, or even speed things even up even more? I can think back to just how much change I've seen in the quality of the water up at Okoboji, for example. When I was a kid growing up, we were loading that lake massively, tons and tons of nitrogen, tons of other things that were leading to quite a bit of algae blooming and other things that were really deteriorating water quality. And there's been an absolute transformation up there. Now, some of that's related to some other invasives that have come into the lake's chain up there with the zebra mussels and so forth, but a lot of it had to do with just getting smarter about how the whole watershed was interconnected and what could be done around the lakes there to get great results, good water quality, good water resources results. But I am under no illusion that we have, you know, the same set of circumstances there or in other parts of Iowa that we have up there. That's its own watershed, a sort of unique space. For me, the question is now, what's it going to take to keep this acceleration in best practices in our urban environment? What's it going to take to get to a tipping point in our ags and our rural parts of the state as well? I've been taught by so many people about just how precarious this moment is when we're talking about the soil in this state. How much of it, I've watched it my entire childhood, rolling down the Mississippi River as well. How much more longer can we just keep doing this before we reach a point where there's no recovery after that? So that's why this idea of, all right, we've got to keep changing and we've got to accelerate the pace of change here with all of these practices across the landscape in Iowa.
Right. Well, yeah, and you know, you bring up soils, and in the urban area, sometimes we're not using them as a resource. And when you're done with the development, do we really have the soils there that we need to infiltrate that water again? Because, you know, I've long taught through the career, like, the green spaces may or may not be doing what you think they are, because if they don't have the soil that was there, the topsoil to infiltrate, if they're not the quality we need, even that area is not going to work.
No, it's not. That reminds me of something really fun that we're doing in Clive right now. It's something that it's been done in so many other parts of the state, but just now finding ways to take it to scale. That's the soil quality restoration on residential properties in Clive.
Yes.
We're going to do 100 all at once here in August and September. In the whole scheme of things, not a huge number, but what I'm really happy about is the response that we got from the community. This was a cost share program that we've set up, so the city's going to cover about half the cost of each of these installations. The turnout, the response we have was huge. People were rushing to get signed up for the program because they wanted to get the good results that come with good soil quality improvements on their yard. Now, a lot of times that was the look and the feel that they want to have on their turf, but to a person that I've worked with on this, it wasn't just that. It was also, again, this idea that I can do something good for my entire watershed. I could do something good for this place that I love, this water that I love here in central Iowa with Walnut Creek and the broader Walnut Creek watershed as well. So I'm excited about it. It makes me optimistic.
It is super exciting, and you know, as somebody that over the years has worked with, you know, helping individual, you know, homeowners do soil quality restoration, this new process that we're looking at that, you know, you're doing here, where you have a big batch of them and you put 100 in a season, is, you know, a great approach. It brings kind of that tipping point that you're looking for. It gets a buzz about it, so people really begin to notice. If you do one in a neighborhood, somebody might not notice. If you're doing 100 in your community, people are going to take notice, and they're continuing to call and looking at more options. So I'm excited to see, you know, where that leads in your program for the next seasons.
Yeah.
Like, that demand for it, and maybe the demand to make sure that the soil's better when you're done developing. You know, all those things that can affect is, it's pretty excellent.
Like all good city government folks too, you know, when we're looking for ideas, we try and come up with some good ones on our own too, but we're happy to steal the good ideas that have come up in other communities. And I think this old idea of a batch of SQRs, your team, you and friends, other friends of Polk County, so many others have been doing this. And were it not for the good example that you all have set and the teaching that you all have done, I would have not been in a position to be able to help execute a program like this here in my community. So as we're doing it now, sort of understanding how we got to this spot, we're putting everything sort of in a kit so that the next community that wants to do this, they can take everything that we put together, the resolutions for our council, the bid documents that we put out there for people who are bidding, even the application materials we put together for the grant, which was very generously provided by the state of Iowa and IDOLS, good partners there at that level of government too. We're going to have this ready to go for the next community that wants to do it as well. We're going to make it easy for other folks to see, oh wow, we can pull this off the way that a little town like Clive pulled it off.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's just a great way to expand and to continue to have it grow, because it's not needing to reinvent the wheel, and it's not hard, but if you make it a franchise, take all the work, just do these steps, and this is the result. That's excellent.
Yeah. That makes a big difference if we're gonna get to that, continue to accelerate, continuing to push faster in this state, continue to try new things as they're coming down the way as well. That's something I guess that, and I'm curious what your experience with this as well too. As much as we're doing, or that I've had a chance to experiment with, just in a short amount of time working here in Clive, we've had some bumps, right? And so trying all these new things has come with risk as well. There are a couple of practices that we've tried where we're still sort of in the middle of figuring out how it's going to work, but it's come with a little bit of change management for our neighborhoods as well. And with that, there are some folks who look at it and say, this will never work, or this isn't the right practice, or why are we doing something different than what we've done before as well. As you've encountered sort of that resistance to change or that unfamiliarity with some of these best management practices, what have you been able to do to kind of bring people along with you over time so that they said, oh, I can see the benefit of this bioretention cell, or I understand now what soil quality restoration does, or I understand why we need, like on a construction site, why it's so important that we are controlling erosion and not just sticking things down the storm sewer and so forth. How have you brought people along?
Yeah, well, I think it's been somewhat of a long process of my career to kind of to do that, and I think some of it's been some of our massive events where we really pause and say what's happening here and why is it happening. When you get to tell that why is it the way it is and what do we need to do to change it, I think has helped some. And then I think it's, individually working with people to try things. I really feel like a lot of the funding that's come through, I work with the Water Quality Initiative funding from IDOLS. I work with the sponsored project program from SRF and DNR, and IEDA has some funding, and IFA has had some money putting into these. And like right now I might have close to 50 million in projects. And I think those key projects that we've done over the last 6-7 years going forward have put the spotlight on the fact that we can do this and help to work from the concept through the construction of getting through it. And when a community does that and has something successful, I point other communities to it. Just like, you learning about the SQR process from another community. Just, learning from that and saying, I wonder if we can try that there, and taking a little bit of the risk out of it to try it and to really make it happen. I think that's been, that coupled with just trying to get the understanding of the need for why we're doing these things has helped to kind of push us forward. The other big help has been the policy process, the 2-year process to go through to come up with what can we, to helping people understand the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual and the things in the manual that are there, and how that can lead to putting that into place and then having it be more, this is how we do business. I think that's kind of been the process.
It's been slow at times, but other times it seems like it's gone pretty darn quick too.
Yeah.
Where things have moved quickly and then we've had good acceleration as well. So, when you imagine Iowa a decade from now, 2 decades from now, and you could say, these are the changes that I hope we see that I think are going to be most impactful to having a better water future in Iowa. What are some of those key changes you hope that we're celebrating 2 decades from now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I really think some of it goes back to some of those policy decisions to really understand how we can develop in a better way, that we can have that green infrastructure, that we can look at where does the water need to go, how can we work with it better, how can we start with that and then fit ourselves in around it, because I think it makes quality of life a lot better for us as well, to those places for people to be. So hopefully we'll see that engaged a little more, and soil health is a big deal, and some of those natives are a big deal. I think getting at some of that may help us going forward. What about you?
Well, for me, it starts with affection. I want more Iowans and more people all around the upper Mississippi watersheds to love their water. I want them to love living near it. I want them to understand how much power it has to inspire people, to have adventures, to learn about themselves, to learn about their community, how we've grown the way that we have. So many parts of that story are about how we live with water, how the water shapes us. And affection for me is really where it starts, because I think that from there you have then the opportunity to build knowledge base, to build skill sets, build awareness and concern for all of the other facets that come along with water resources, whether it's erosion or whether it's agriculture or whether it's surface waters or whether it's water that we bring up from the ground that we drink as well, wherever you might happen to get your drinking water from in your community. I just want people to have a growing affection that then takes them off into all of these other ways of knowing better how water shapes them and how they have an opportunity to shape their water as well. And then from that, because the Judge is an optimist, right? So after we've built up in Iowa that choir, all those folks who are singing this music,
yes,
I want all of those folks to go out and start their own choirs. I want them to be the next group of people who go and in their community say, hey, they did this SQR thing over in Clive. I think we can do that thing in my town as well. Or, wow, they did this edge of stream practice or edge of field practice here over in Muscatine County. I bet we could do that up in Sioux County as well.
Yes.
I want to see that kind of catalytic change happening with people's hearts and with their brains, so that we get more and more of these practices fast going into the ground, going into every single watershed in this state. But I do think it starts in many ways with how well we tell the story, how well we build up that affection,
yes,
and help other people then tell their story. Same way that we could talk about growing up on lakes, going and playing in creeks, places we went to school, and then early experiences we had that helped shape sort of our sense of what we wanted to do. We didn't just figure that story out. We've been kind of telling it to other people as well. We've been sharing that story with other people. I hope we get a chance to inspire a bunch of other people to tell their water story as well, and their community's water story as well. And that they get the chance then to inspire a bunch of other young kiddos to go and understand their water story and tell it to other folks too.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. That's great.